Hello, in this video I thought I'd cover some of the features associated with this executable MBSE profile. So I'll just look at the requirement analysis side of it, and I'll start by creating a project. Doesn't really matter too much about this. So the first thing about the profile is it's a helper to be able to set up and create model structures. And I don't have a single model structure for everything in one model. Rather, I try and build kind of reusable components developed by different people in different models that can be shared. And one aspect of that is this idea of particular packages which have particular types which can be consumed by different projects, or they could be stacked in the same project. So when I say create a project, I always create it with one of these structures. Here's an example. So a use case package structure creates a package for doing use case modeling, but it doesn't just create that package, it also creates a shared actor package and optionally a requirement package. And it does it based on a unique name. So in this case, I'll just take the default. And the idea of that unique name is that you might have different people working on different aspects of the system, which you could call features or functions, but essentially they are collections of use cases. Or more importantly, they have ownership within the model, where somebody could be working in this package independently with someone working in a different package. And this is what I mean by stacking. So if I create another use case package here, I'm going to stack, this is feature B, and I'll create a separate requirements package for that because it's owned by a different user. I could sort of flow the requirements here into the same requirements that are developed by the other feature, but I'm grouping requirements here in terms of features, but I am sharing the actor package. So here I have feature B package, which is kind of like, user A and user B's packages in this bit of common model. And I could develop these in different models and then bring them together later. And an aspect of that is the unique naming of the package, because that unique naming also relates to the file on the file system. So this is an SBS file, what we call a unit in Rhapsody. So here I am, I'm user A, working on feature A, and this is going to have a use case involving the homeowner. Now, some of the settings here about what actors are created in the actor package to begin with are driven from properties on the model, and there's a subject for this executable MBSE profile where I've collected together the properties. So these are the default actors, and obviously you can change the property file in the profile if you're in a particular domain where there's certain actors, like automotive. Or you could just create them actors and then rename them. Obviously, I always have an environment actor, and I'm not going to remove that. That's quite useful. I can explain in a different video perhaps why that's the case. So one of the features of this profile is to flow requirements from a use case package into a requirements package. And that's just to automate one of the very common manual steps when performing requirement analysis with use cases. So this perhaps is a requirement about the goals of what the mousetrap is going to do. So the goal might be, the mousetrap shall remove this from the home. This refinement tool is actually added by the profile. So there are customizations here to make the process of creating models a lot smoother just by putting certain tools into the palettes in the right places according to the profile and the process. Fundamentally, what relationship am I going to use in use cases? Well, if I've chosen refinement, then put it in the toolbar rather than make people draw dependencies and apply a new term. It's going to have its own problems. So let's now show you another bit of automation. So if I double click, this question appears, is actually part of the profile, the plugin that's running because of this executable MBSE profile. And this is what we mean by accelerating a process with essentially a toolkit that uses the product automation to automate steps. This has created an activity diagram with a template for performing use case analysis with some properties set on the diagram to make it easy to write free-flowing text. And this is one of my approaches to use case modeling. And so rather than model functions here, I'm actually going to model steps of a use case that I might have written in a Word document. And I just feel that that's a very easy, accessible method which can then be used to perform more detailed analysis later. But it's also very easy to get non-technical or non-model-based system engineering experts to get value from modeling very quickly. So preconditions is set experience. Obviously, this could have a bit more complicated flow, but I've got pre and post conditions associated with a use case and build a scenario of a use case and then expand it with decision nodes. I have actually also simplified the activity diagram here. And all my automations are done with new term stereotypes. So this is a textual activity diagram that this particular profile has been set up to create activity diagrams with. And that just removes some of the things like action pins and activity parameters and swim lanes, because I'm not going to use them for this particular part of the model. So don't give people the option, because we want consistency in our modeling. We don't want, when we are doing large-scale modeling, to have deviations from the method, unless those deviations are considered to be important in the process, which means we'd modify the helper or the profile accordingly rather than allow people to do everything. So this particular method has some other automation here that's useful. Notice, for example, that actions on activity diagrams have different action text from the name in the browser. So this is one of the things in Rhapsody, because Rhapsody is built for software code generation initially, it has this idea of keeping the names in the browser so that they don't have things like spaces, and they are essentially codable. So to get these actions to appear in doors next, for example, as with the same name as the text, there's some automation here to effectively auto-rename actions. And this automation is similar to that provided by the SE toolkit, which supports the Harmony methods. But this particular helper, this executable MBSE helper, is an alternative to the SE toolkit, and it does some of the similar things. I've got some naming conventions here. For example, this activity diagram is a child of the use case, so it has the same name. So if I rename the name of the use case, just having some automation to be able to auto update the activity diagram names just helps keep the model consistent. So it's very subtle. One of the less subtle things is this idea of capturing requirements and moving them automatically into this requirement package. And I do particularly find this quite valuable to collect the requirements together in the same location. There's also a little helper here to create requirements from the text of the actions. That's just putting a requirement on the diagram, taking the text on these actions, and it also moves that requirement, providing that there's a dependency from this use case package to a type of package, which is a requirement package. Then that automation moves that requirement into that requirement package. So I don't need to write it from scratch. I can just manipulate the text that's there. So those are sort of some of the automations associated with the requirement analysis section. If I go one step further, because obviously I might have multiple use case packages, I could have one use case package for the whole system if it was just, one developer, but really I'm trying to get different people to be working on different parts of the model to avoid sort of conflicts and people editing the same diagrams and using the diff merge. Because although Rhapsody can do that, sometimes it just makes sense to organize your users so that they are isolated. And use case analysis is a very good way of doing that. I therefore have these types of packages, new term packages in the model. And rather than have sort of flat sort of base UML packages, I think the new term packages give a bit more ability to get straight to the point of action, the kind of place on the coalface where the users are working. So rather than have a big office where everybody's doing everything, I'm organising, my accountants to be in the same room, if you like, and my workshop to be slightly differently, because people working in a workshop are going to need different tools than someone working in the accountancy office. And that's how I organise these models. And that goes as far as also changing the right-click menus. So I've got a very simplified right-click menu for the use case packages, because I'm not going to do block definition diagrams here. My requirements packages are for capturing requirements, so I can have tables and matrices, but not use case diagrams. So it provides focus really for parts of the model to have particular roles. And that becomes important when we look at the process, which is the flow of information between different developers and modelers across a large organization or a large project.